Good morning. Happy Sabbath. Today we are looking at a sermon titled, Who is the Mother? This year we're spending time focusing on questions about God, questions in the Bible, questions about life. And while today's question, Who is the Mother, might not be such a major question that all of us need to ask ourselves, but it is a major question that we're going to look at in one of the Bible stories this morning. And it's a question that the answer that it provides, gives us a deeper insight into what being a mother is all about. This weekend is Mother's Day weekend. We're spending some time looking at mothers and seeing at what are some of the core things that make mothers good mothers. And a little bit more than that, we'll see just how being a mother is rooted deeply in the heart of God as well. My mother, she loved to travel. That was one of her favorite things to do in life. And thankfully, she and my father would bring me along on some of their adventures around the world. I remember one time, I think I was probably in first grade. We were traveling in England, and we're in London, actually. And, big city, big crowds walking down the street. And I got distracted just for a little moment. I don't know, maybe there was a toy shop. I forget exactly what distracted me. But I stopped, and then I looked at the toys, or I looked at whatever was there, and then I continued to walk. And I was certain that I was walking next to my mother until I looked up. And I saw that it wasn't my mother at all. And that moment when I realized I wasn't next to my mom, I just immediately just started to panic a little. There's this big crowd in this big city. I did a quick 360 turn. I didn't see my mother anywhere, and I was like, oh no, what's happening? Where is she? And so that panic started to set in, and right before the tears started to come, there my mother emerged from the crowd, came over to me, grabbed my hand, and away we went. Needless to say, she wasn't too happy about what had happened. She showed and explained to me just how unhappy she was that I had gotten distracted and left her side. She was probably a little upset with herself as well for letting me wander off in that moment. But that has to be one of the big fears that parents have. I know as a child that was a big fear, getting lost from my mother, from my parents. And I can imagine as a mother that's a tremendous fear to lose track of your child at any point, much less in a big crowd of people, in a big city, in a different part of the world. That's why my mom was very explicit in pulling me aside and telling me that I am never, ever to leave her side again, no matter what is going on. I need to stay by her. And that's why mothers today have that same talk with their kids, right? You can't leave my sight. Don't ever, even if you're playing in the yard or in the park, don't ever leave my sight, because you don't want to lose your child. And you don't not just want to lose your child, you want to make sure they're doing well, that they're safe. And so you have these conversations with your children to make sure they stay by you, make sure they stay within your sight, make sure they don't go off with strangers, right? Because you don't want to lose your child or have your child taken from you. In fact, I was watching a video actually that came up a few times on my Facebook feed the past couple of weeks, and I want to show a quick clip of it. It has to deal with the importance of parents having these talks with their children.
Hello.
Hi, nice to meet you.
My name's Joe. I'm filming a social experiment. Now, how many times a day do you tell your kid not to talk to strangers?
I tell my kid every day.
All right. So if I go over to your kid right now, will he or she talk to me or run away?
I'm pretty sure she's not going to talk to you, but try.
All right. Which one's your kid? I'm going to put it to the test. I'm going to go over there with the puppy.
She's right there.
She's right over there?
Yeah, in the jean jacket.
All right, I'm going to go over there and I'm going to talk to her as a stranger, all right? Hi.
Hi.
Look at the puppy.
Puppy.
Look at the puppy. Like the puppy?
Yeah.
Can you guess what her name is?
Duncan.
Duncan? You were close. Her name's Donuts. I got some more puppies. Want to go see the other puppies?
Yeah.
All right, let's go. Come on. Right over here. Give me your hand.
And he went on to do it 2 more times with 2 other additional sets of mothers and children. You know, mothers that were very clear, that had had these talks with their kids not to go off with strangers. He was easily able to whisk away their kids with promises of puppies. And he ends the video by saying, you need, reminding parents and reinforcing that belief that you really need to have these important conversations with your kids of staying where you can see them and not going off with strangers. And it's a little unsettling, isn't it, for mothers and fathers to see how easily something like that could happen? But, so according to the Department of Justice, 9% of are kidnapped by a family member in a custody dispute. That's the vast, vast, vast majority of kidnappings are done by family members, not strangers. You have that stranger danger that maybe you've heard of. That's really not the biggest case. It's really family members. 3%, the next largest category, are children abducted by non-family members, but usually someone that the child knows. Again, not a stranger. Only 1/20th of 1%, a small fraction of 1%, about 100 children per year, are kidnapped in the stereotypical stranger abductions you hear about in the news. And you might think, all right, this is a little heavy for a Mother's Day sermon, Pastor. Where's some good news? Here's some of the good news, all right? That nearly 90% of missing children simply misunderstood directions or plans, or got lost, or have run away. Now, getting lost or running away, still not great, but at least they're not kidnapped. And overall, the percentage is pretty good, that 99.8% of all children who go missing do come home. Of course, if your child is in that 0.2%, it's not too comforting, right? But the vast, vast, vast majority of children that do go missing do end up coming home. And it's important to know that that's the case, because no parent, no mother wants to have their child go missing, wants to have their child kidnapped, especially in that video, seeing their child get kidnapped basically right in front of them, right? Today we're looking at a story in Scripture where something like that takes place, not at a park, not with the temptation of dogs or the promise of puppies, but we see there's a story in 1 Kings about a mother that sees an attempt from another mother to take her child from her. Maybe you're aware of this story. It happens in the reign of King Solomon, who is known as the wisest man who has ever lived. And we read about this story in 1 Kings chapter 3, starting with verse 16. It says, "One day 2 prostitutes came to Solomon and stood before the king." Now, right here, just at the beginning of the story, we see that this is kind of unusual, isn't it? That 2 prostitutes come before the king. I mean, this wouldn't happen in 2017 in our country, right? You wouldn't hear of a case of 2 prostitutes going before the Supreme Court, right? They would be like, oh, what? That's a case for Judge Judy, not these 9 justices. But here, these 2 women that the Bible calls prostitutes come before the king, who is the highest authority in the land. Now, some commentators say that these weren't prostitutes, that these were women that had simply gotten pregnant without being married. And back then, 3,000 years ago, that was almost as bad as being a technical prostitute. But whatever the case was, these women who were cast out of society, whether because of their profession or whether they just had simply had a child or gotten pregnant out of wedlock, These women that were on the fringes, on the margins, the lowest rung on the ladder of society, they still had an audience with the king there in the courts with King Solomon himself. One of the women said, "Sir, this woman and I live in the same house. We were both pregnant and ready to give birth to our babies. I had my baby while she was there with me." Verse 18 continues, and it says, 3 days later, she also gave birth to her baby. There was no one else in the house with us, just the two of us. One night, while this woman was asleep with her baby, the baby died. Other versions, other translations say that during the night, the mother smothered the baby while she was sleeping. Had rolled over or had done something during the night while she was asleep and caused the death of her child. Now, can you imagine how tragic that is? Can you imagine what that mother must have gone through it to see through this horrible accident that her son had died? Every so often we hear in modern day the tragic stories of parents that have forgotten their child in a car seat in the car, and by the time they realize that the car had gotten too hot and they come and they find that their child has died. And I can't imagine what it'd be like to go through that, to experience that as a parent, to experience that as a mother. And yet, here we have this story of this woman who didn't leave her child in the car, but through an accident of sleeping when she was not conscious, ended up causing the death of her precious baby boy. Heartbreaking. Tragic. But here's where the story turns. This mother stops being such a tragic figure and becomes something a bit more monstrous. Verse 20 says, "That night," the other mother is saying, "that night while I was asleep, she took my son from my bed and carried him to her bed. Then she put the dead baby in my bed." The mother was just so distraught, so overcome with grief and pain, and she just couldn't stand the thought of her losing her son. And she saw her housemate, her roommate, and saw her baby and said, I can replace my son. I can do this switch, do this swap, and I can erase this horrific thing that I have done. In the morning, the mother continues, "I woke up and was about to feed the baby when I saw that he was dead. When I looked at him more closely, I saw that he was not my baby." But the other woman said, "No, the dead baby is yours, and the one still alive is mine." But the first woman said, "No, you are wrong. The dead baby is yours. The one that is still alive is mine." So the two women argued in front of the king. Then King Solomon said, "Each of you says that the living baby is your own and that the dead baby belongs to the other woman." And so there's that question, who is the mother? All you have is the two stories of these two women that don't have the best reputations to begin with. How are you going to tell the difference? How are you going to determine who the mother is? Now in 2017, the answer is simple, right? Just go get an easy DNA test. You'll have the answer within a short amount of time. But back in 950 BC, there was no such thing as a DNA test. King Solomon had really no concept of DNA, much less how to test it. And so all he was left with to try to solve this unsolvable problem was his wisdom. This deep, important, God-given wisdom. And so, King Solomon sent his servant to get a sword. He told the servant, "Cut the living baby in two and give one half of the baby to each woman." Now, I remember hearing this story for the first time when I was probably 10, 11, 12. In Sabbath school, we were talking about this story. And I remember thinking, even at that age, what in the world? What kind of answer is this? I mean, you hear the story, you're saying that Solomon is the wisest man that has ever lived. This doesn't seem like a very wise answer because killing the living baby doesn't seem to be solving anyone's problems here. How can this be a good answer? How can this help anyone? To cut the living baby in two. The second woman said, "Yes, cut him in two, then neither of us will have him." But the first woman, the real mother, loved her son and said to the king, "Please, sir, don't kill the baby. Give him to her." The first mother had already experienced the heartbreak of losing her child, and in her pain, in her grief, and perhaps in a mental break she was experiencing, she said, "Fine, I don't care. I've already gone through it. I've already seen the death of a child. Just do it. I don't, if I can't be happy, then my roommate can't be happy, because her happiness is even making my pain and my grief even worse. So just get rid of the baby, and then neither of us will be happy. Neither of us will have a baby, and both of us will be heartbroken." But the mother, the true mother, doesn't have that mindset. It says that she was filled with love for her son and said, "Fine, take the baby, give it to this woman." Then King Solomon said, "Stop. Don't kill the baby. Give him to this woman, because she is the real mother." And then it dawned on me when I heard this story for the first time, oh, he is a genius. I'd have never thought of that. Because Solomon, in his wisdom, he saw the truth of the matter. He understood that when this baby's life was threatened, the true mother's character would be revealed. He saw and he understood that that at the core of being a good mother was the willingness to sacrifice her own happiness for the safety and the well-being of her child. He saw and he witnessed that this woman was willing to voluntarily give up her child, to give to this woman who is trying to kidnap her child, who had already killed her own child. She was willing to give her child to this woman for the chance that he would continue to live. Solomon realized that this mother was willing to give up the hopes and the dreams that she had already placed in her son. To give up that child that she had born to this other woman. He saw that this mother was willing to sacrifice her happiness, was willing to sacrifice her own motherhood so that her child would live. And this is the first insight that we see, the important insight of what it means at the core of being a good mother. That good mothers are willing to sacrifice their happiness for their children's earthly good. Now, this doesn't mean that mothers always want to sacrifice their happiness, right? Doesn't mean that they all are like, "Oh, fine, yeah, do whatever, I don't care anymore." No, but they are willing to. When push comes to shove, when the need is there, mothers are willing to sacrifice their own happiness, their own dreams, their own desires for the good, the earthly good of their children. But the interesting thing here is more than this. It's the fact that this heart of a mother reflects the heart of God. Because God was willing to sacrifice himself for his children's eternal good. Just like mothers are willing to sacrifice their dreams, their hopes, their desires, their happiness for their children's earthly good, because that's really the only thing that they can really have control over to some extent. But God was willing to sacrifice himself for his children's, for yours, for my eternal good. We see this in Romans chapter 5, verse 8. Paul is writing to the Christians in Rome, and he says, "But God shows his love for us in that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us." God was so willing for us to have the hope and the promise of eternal good, that he sacrificed himself for you and me. As we continue to look at how the Bible describes mothers and the insight it provides for us as we think about mothers, we look at the wisdom literature, the book of Proverbs in particular, which was often attributed to that king that we just read about, the wisest man who has ever lived, to King Solomon himself. We read in Proverbs chapter 1, verse 8. He says, "My son, listen to your father when he corrects you, and don't ignore what your mother teaches you." Well, this might be Mother's Day. There's some insight for fathers as well, right? He says, listen to your father when he corrects you, and don't ignore what your mother teaches you, because this is important stuff. This is the stuff that you need as you grow, and even after you're grown, to listen to your parents, to listen to your father, even though it might not feel good to be corrected, even though you might not agree with what your mother is teaching you. Listen to what they're saying, listen to them, and follow them. A few chapters later, he kind of explains why, what happens. In chapter 10, verse 1, he says, "A wise son makes his father glad, but a foolish son is a grief to his mother." He says, son, if, as a son or as a daughter, if you don't listen to what your father says or what your mother says, it's going to have consequences, right? But when you listen to your father, when you accept his correction, it makes the father glad. Because your father is correcting you for a good purpose, for a good reason. He's trying to train you into becoming a responsible, good person, a good son, a good daughter, a good man, a good woman. And it makes him glad when you accept his correction and you change your actions accordingly. But he says when you don't listen, when you don't listen to what your mother is teaching you, when you don't listen to what they're trying to tell you, then it's a foolish thing. Because your mother is trying to teach you the ways to go. Your mother is trying to teach you the ways that the important things in life, the good path, the good choices that you should be making, because she knows what's good. She knows what's best for you. So when you ignore her, when you don't listen to what she's saying, it's foolishness. And he says, and that foolishness causes grief to your mom. When you don't listen to what she's teaching, when you don't listen to what she says, it's foolishness because she has your best interest at heart, and only a fool goes against his or her best interest. And this foolishness, though, it grieves your mother because she knows what you should be doing. She knows what's best for you, and when you choose not to do it, it hurts. It's not a ego thing. She's like, oh, how dare you not listen to me? It's oh, why would you choose that? I know that that's only going to cause you grief and pain and harm and trouble. And it grieves our mothers when we do not listen to what they say. And so this is another truth, insight into the core of being a good mother, is that good mothers are willing to experience grief because of the foolishness of their children. Because we all know, even those of us that aren't parents or mothers, I had a mother, and I know that I didn't choose to listen to her all the time, right? I chose to make my own decisions, to do things that went against what she was wanting me to do. And I know that that was foolishness looking back on it now. And I know that that brought her grief. But the thing of it is, mothers know that that's going to happen. They know that their children aren't always going to listen to them. They know that there's going to be times when their children don't do the wise thing, that their children do the foolish thing, and they know that that's going to bring grief. And yet mothers don't just give up on their children because of that, right? Mothers, and hopefully fathers, stay faithful to their children even when their children act foolish, even when their children bring pain and bring grief. Mothers don't say, you know what, you didn't listen to me, so forget it. I'm done. I'm not your mother anymore. Just get out, right? Can you imagine a good mother doing that? Good mothers are willing to experience grief. They know it's going to happen. They continue to do it intentionally. They know they're willing to experience the grief because of the foolishness of their children. But again, this important quality of a mother is reflected in the character of God. Because God was willing to experience grief because of the foolishness of His children. Time and time again, God tried to get His children, tried to get His followers to do a certain thing, to travel a certain path. And time again, they said, no, we want to go our own way. We want to do our own thing. And yet God didn't cut them off. God continued to dwell with them, continued to contend with them, even to the point of sending Jesus Himself, coming to the earth Himself in the flesh and blood to try to get them back on the right path. And this is why we read here in Luke chapter 13. Jesus is talking. He's looking there from the Mount of Olives onto Jerusalem, to the city, and He says, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, you who kill the prophets and stone those who sent to you. How often I have longed to gather your children together, as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, and you were not willing. Here Jesus is crying over His children that chose to not listen to His teachings, that chose to go their own path, that chose to engage in foolishness and brought Him grief to the point of tears and heartache. And yet, He still did not say, you know what, I'm done, forget it. He still continued to contend with His children to the point of the cross. And the good news is He still continues to walk with us today. That God has not turned His back on us. That God remains faithful to you and to me today. And I think perhaps the key to being a good mother, the most vital core component of good motherhood is described here by Paul as he writes to a young man named Timothy. In 1 Timothy chapter 1, verse 5, Paul says, I remember your true faith. That kind of faith first belonged to your grandmother Lois and to your mother Eunice. I know you now have that same faith. Paul says, I've seen this. I've seen how your grandmother passed this faith on to your mother, and I've seen how that faith has been passed by your mother on to you. And this is maybe one of the most important things that mothers can do, according to Scripture, is to see that faith and to have that faith and not just keep it to themselves, right? But to do all they can to pass it on to the next generation. See, this is the core component of good motherhood here, according to this passage. Good mothers are willing to live as an example of faith for their children. Good mothers are willing to sacrifice for the earthly good of their children, but they're also willing to live as an example of faith for their children, so that faith gets passed on and their children get to see what it looks like to have an active relationship with God, to see, not just hear the words, but to see it modeled in the lives and the actions and the habits of their mother. Good mothers are willing to live as an example of faith for their children so that it gets passed down from generation to generation. And again, this important quality of mothers also is reflective of the quality of God, the characteristics of God. Because God was willing to live as an example of faith for His children. Jesus says in John chapter 13, verse 15, I have given you an example to follow. Do as I have done to you. In this context, he is talking about foot washing, which Emmanuel and I were talking about earlier this morning. But he goes on to say, not just about foot washing. It's in a broader context as well. That the servant is not greater than the master. The teacher is not surpassed by the student. We have laid out an example for you to follow. So do it. I have lived as an example. I have shown you. You have been with me for 3.5 years, and you have seen what it's like to live in a vibrant, active connection, relationship with the Father. You have seen through my prayers. You have seen through my habits. You have seen through my miracles. You have seen through the way I live life that it is important, it is significant, it is vital to have that connection with God. I have lived this out as an example for you to follow. So do as I have done, Jesus says. So this weekend, as many of us gather to celebrate our mothers, to remember our mothers, to honor our mothers, know that we serve a God who isn't simply our Heavenly Father, but we serve a God that exhibits the very best qualities of our mothers as well. And because the heart of God is so clearly reflected in the hearts of our mothers, there is something special for mothers. Ellen White, one of the founders of our church, she says this in the book Adventist Home, that the Christian mother's work, if done faithfully in God, will be immortalized. The votaries or followers of fashion will never see or understand the immortal beauty of that Christian mother's work, while the majesty of heaven will write the name of that faithful mother in the book of immortal fame. Isn't that a beautiful promise? We understand that motherhood is tough, which is why we have a Mother's Day to recognize and to bring honor to mothers and the tough work that motherhood entails. But that when we look through Scripture and we see these important principles of what good mothers are, that even though the world might not understand and might not see the depth of your sacrifice, might not understand all of the pain or the grief that is part and parcel to motherhood, might not understand the hard work that goes into living as an example of faith to your children. The good news is that heaven sees. That God, who has the heart of a mother, sees and writes those names in the book of immortal fame. So this weekend, as we think about mothers, as we honor all of the work that mothers do, let's watch a video here, just to kind of remind us, those of us that have had mothers, what they've done for us, and to give us insight into mothers today as what they're going through and the things they do for their children.
Mommy's here. Oh, my sweet boy.
Do you have any idea what time it is?
Can you say mama? Mama? Mama.
Attaboy.
Open big wide for mama. What a big boy you are. What a big boy you are.
Oh, hey. No, we can't go to church with jelly all over our face, can we? Oh, my. go put that snake back in the hole right now.
Good, buddy. Yeah. Way to go. All right, buddy. Hey. Oh, buddy. You okay? You all right?
Come here. Oh, it's okay. It's okay.
Now I lay me down to sleep. I pray the Lord my soul to keep. If I should die before I wake, I pray the Lord.
Hey, Mom.
Mommy needs just a minute. Please.
Hey, Mom. I think you look pretty no matter what. Even when your hair looks really weird.
Oh, Mom.
Go straight there and come right back.
Hold here, honey.
Oh, Mom's here. It's okay. Oh, you're okay. Oh, thank you, Lord. Thank you. Thank you.
Oh.
Oh.
Mom, stop it.
Mom? Dad? I asked Beth to marry me.
Well, what'd she say? Welcome to the family.
I'm so happy for you.
Hey, Mom.
Where's that grandbaby?
There she
Oh, there she is.
Oh, yeah, nice to see you too.
Oh, it's okay.
Oh, it's okay.
It's okay. You did great.
What's that?
The children. You did really great. I always knew you'd be a good dad, but you did really, really great.
Hey, Mom. What are you doing? Of course you are.
Come sit with me.
You know, I was thinking just the other day about what a wonderful mom you are. I mean, God really blessed me with a great lady. You're my mom. You've always been there for me. Even when I didn't want you to be. And nobody ever believed in me like you do. Thank you. I love you, Mom.
And I love you, son.